Action.
Yep.
Merry Christmas, Bodie. I am going to give you a quick little seminar in using the stuff that you got for Christmas. So the first thing we need to do is teach you how to tie 2 different fishing knots. So we'll look down here and I'll show you how that goes. I got you a box of jigs that look like this, and if you notice the eyelets are all painted shut. So just take one jig and push the hook from one through the eyelet of another. You might have to do it from both directions, and that'll break the paint out of the jig head. So once you got that broken out, now you can see through it. So the first knot I'm going to show you is the trilene knot. This knot works for everything. It's the most basic knot in fishing, and one that you're going to have to know. So make sure you're zoomed in real close down here, Becky. You might have to move the camera closer, so you can see nothing but my hands.
Yep.
Okay. So you go through the eyelet first, one time, and then you go back through again. So now we just made a loop right there. See that loop? So we're going to hold on to that loop, put our fingers there, kind of tighten it down. So now that loop is just in my fingers there. We're going to wrap this line around the main line 7 times. I'll just do it a few, but you should do it 7 times. So now you've got this tag end, and we're going to go back through those 2 loops that we've got now. Pull this tag, put it through the loop that we just created, and pull that all tight. And then just trim the extra, and that's a trilene knot. That'll work for everything that you do. I'm going to show you one other loop that's a little bit faster, or one other knot that's a little bit faster. This is called a Palomar knot, and it works if you're just tying a hook or just a jig or a swivel, something small. You go through the eyelet once, you go back through the same direction. So now we've got a loop like that. What?
Well, I'm having trouble keeping up with you.
Oh, sorry. So now we're through like that. Then you just take this loop, tie an overhand knot across the line that you just made, and now this extra end here you wrap over the jig, and you pull that tight, and then just trim the tag end. And that one is faster if you're just tying one small little thing like a jig or just a single hook. But if you want to perfect one, just get the trilene knot down and you'll be all set. Now let's go over and look at all the stuff we got over here. You're still recording, right? Mm-hmm. So your parents said that you can get minnows, which is great, and if you can get...
I can't get very far away from you here.
Oh, well, it's not a big deal. He doesn't need to see my head. So the best thing to start off with is live bait. If you can get minnows, we should be using a bobber. I got your bobber stop, slip bobbers, sinkers, and hooks.
You have to slow down. I can't keep up.
Well, back up a little.
But then you can't see what it is.
And we got some jigs. So if you can trap minnows, you should trap some minnows and use a slip bobber. I got this rod already set up with everything on it, and you've got all this stuff. So to set this up, the first thing that you do is you put your line through one of the bobber stops. You pull the black sheath off out towards the end of the line, and you pull the pink stop up. Then you just pull on the 2 tag ends and tighten the bobber stop. So now that's on the line. Next, you put one of the little beads that's in that package on the line. That line's up here. Then after that, you thread a bobber on the line. So you've got a bobber stop, a bead, and a bobber, and then you tie on a jig to the end of your line. And then whatever depth you want to fish, right now the bobber stop is about 2 feet above the jig, and if I wanted my jig to be down deeper, I would just slide this bobber stop up towards the tip of my rod, and now the bobber stop is about maybe 3.5, 4 feet. So what happens is when you cast this out, your jig sinks to the bottom, and you have to have enough weight to keep pulling that jig down. And then when it gets to the bobber will stand up and sit there and float and suspend your jig. So you're going to, hopefully, you're going to be using some minnows. I got a minnow here, and I'll show you how to hook them. There's 2 different ways to hook them. Zoom in close here now, come close. The first one is you put the hook inside of his mouth, open his mouth up a little bit, and run the hook up through the top of his head. Don't get it so deep that you get him in the brain, but you run it up through the upper jaw, and he'll be able to swim. This minnow's already dead, but your minnow should be able to swim on there pretty actively. The other way to hook them is right beneath the dorsal fin of the minnow. You just hook them into the meat of their back. Again, not so deep that you get them in the spine, but you hook them like that, just through the meat underneath the dorsal fin of the minnow, and he'll be able to swim around on there. I got you some plain hooks too, if you don't want to use a jig, or if your jig isn't quite heavy enough to sink the line, you can add sinkers to the line to give it more weight to pull it down. Or you could just use a sinker, got all the sinkers in here, and a single hook. I got you 2 different kinds of single hooks. The gold ones would be good for if you're using minnows, and then these bronze ones would be good if you can get some worms, some night crawlers. This is a rubber night crawler, and I wouldn't ever use a whole night crawler. A half is plenty. So when you get your night crawlers, I would break them in half, and I would take them and thread them on the hook a little bit. So you push the hook down through the top of their head and kind of run it through their body a little bit, and then out. And then you could have that tied on to the end of your line on your bobber. I also got you a spinnerbait, probably the most effective bass bait ever. Just throw that out, it shouldn't get snagged. They'll eat it for sure. And you got a jitterbug, which is the bait that I always used to throw as a little kid. It rides on the surface of the water. You just reel it in real slow. You'll see it wobble back and forth, and it'll make a bubble trail. It'll go bloop, 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 bloop. And then pretty soon there's going to be a big splash behind it, and a bass will take it down. And it's a lot of fun to catch them on this. So, good luck, Merry Christmas, and send me pictures of all your fish.